This box here is called a correlation matrix. And what I'm showing here is the relationship between my students' grades in ELA and their grades in their various other classes in history, math, science, and PE. So for example, the relationship between ELA and history is a 0.64. This range is between -1 and a +1. So what that means is that, and so you see here that the relationship between ELA and ELA is 1.0. It's a perfect correlation, and that's because you're comparing ELA with itself. So this first student's 65 with a 65, 98 with a 98, etc. So if this number is positive, what that means is that generally speaking, students who were stronger in ELA were also stronger in history. Students who were weaker in ELA were also weaker in history, for example. And so the closer that number is to 1.0, the stronger that relationship is. None of these numbers are negative. If any of these numbers were negative, then that would have suggested if, for example, history in ELA right here was a negative 0.64, what that would have suggested was that students who scored high in ELA scored low in history, and students who scored high in history scored low in ELA. That doesn't make intuitive sense, but I suppose it could be possible if that were a trend across 100 students or 1,000 students. Then if that were the trend, then this would come up as negative. If it were 0, there would be no correlation. But really, if it's somewhere between, let's say, a -0.1 and a 0.1, that would be, we would call that a very weak or no correlation. Basically, anything 0.3 or 0.3 to 0.5 is going to be moderate. 0.5 and higher is going to be strong, in this context at least. So almost everything here is relatively strong, and that's somewhat to be expected. So the reason why we would set this up again, because the expectation is that strong students in one class are going to be strong students in another. If that's not the case, then it warrants further investigation. And so it's just a sort of a handy way of investigating whether or not, your grades are, whether or not there's any red flags that need further investigation. So how to set this up. I will open up, this is in the way. I'm going to add a sheet here. Okay. So what I do is I will just copy this. So what you want to do is, whoops, wrong one. You want to make your heading here. So for name, I put ID numbers. And the reason I did that was for two reasons. Number one reason, I don't need student names in my spreadsheet. I don't need their personal information. And the second reason is if a couple years down the line, we want to compare, for some reason, we want to compare their 9th grade grades to their 10th grade grades, or their 9th grade grades with their Regents exam scores, it would be, I think, more efficient to match ID numbers with ID numbers, because names can be misspelled or they can be formatted differently. And if they're misspelled or formatted differently, then combining sheets becomes much more complicated, if not impossible. So I put ID numbers under name, and then ELA, history, math, science, PE. And then what I did was just format it that's the row sheet again. Just format it the same way over here, where you're going to make the matrix. Make the matrix. Okay. I can take out name. I can write CORREL for correlation. And then what you want to do is you want to make it in the same order. So ELA goes first, history, math, science, PE, and we can format this later. So here's what we do. I'm going to go over to School Tool. And what I do is I click on roster here, And the way I did this to make it go fairly quickly, all right, click on the student name, click on grades, make sure you're in quarter one, and then you have the grades. And I just made it simple. I know some students are taking topics, some students are taking geometry, etc. It doesn't matter to me. I just do math, English. We're not going to get that detailed. So what we did was ELA, history, math, science, PE. Okay, and so the way I did, so clicking back and forth is obnoxious and takes forever. The way I did this quickly was I had my school computer open, I had my Chromebook open. One of these things had the spreadsheet on it, one of these things had School Tool on it, and then I just put the student ID, which is of course right here, and then I just plugged in the grades across here, so horizontally, right? So the ELA grade goes here, the history grade, the math grade, the science grade, the PE grade. It's important that these are in the same order as these. Okay, and so here I'm going to, and then when you're done here with this student, easy peasy, you just hit this arrow. It goes to the next student. Okay, see, now this student has geometry instead of algebra. We don't care, we just put it in math. We put the grade. All right, and then we just keep going like that. Next student, etc. Again, easier with two computers. With two computers, I really rolled through all that. This is the most obnoxious part of it, but honestly, it just took me about half an hour to do with two computers open. So I'm just going to copy some of the, well, I can copy all these. I'll copy this whole thing just to show you. All right, over here, and then I'm done with that part. So I put in all the raw data. Okay, so now how do I get the correlations? So here's what you do. You do equal sign, CORREL for correlation, parenthesis. Okay, now the first one is English. It's going to be English all the way across. You want to be able to autofill it so that it's so that you save time. So what you want to do is, in order to keep so what you're doing is you're showing a relationship between ELA and history, and then ELA and math, and then ELA and science, and then ELA and PE. So ELA and history, ELA and math, ELA and science, ELA and PE. So I'm going to drag this across, but the problem is if I don't tell Google Sheets that I want to keep this column here the same, then it doesn't know, and it just starts shifting everything over. So the syntax that you use to let it know that you're keeping it the same is a dollar sign. So $ B, and then $2, colon, that means through, $, oh, that's not it, $B, $, I believe it goes down to 99 or 97. All right, comma, and now this first, this first one is actually itself. So comma, now we're not using the $ because we do want this to change. B2, comma, or I'm sorry, colon, B97. Close the parentheses, enter. No, we don't want to autofill that way. All right, that's 1.0. I actually, you want to do to the, I don't remember how I did it, if it either the 10th or the 100th. What did I do? I did to the 100th. All right, so now I take this and I drag it across. And if I did this right, I think I did, yeah. So this is now, so the $ told us to stay at B2, but then it automatically, intuitively knows to go over to C2 to C97. C2 to C97 is history. This is history. It checks out. So now we want to do the same thing here. Equal for, CORREL for correlation. So again, $, we're still at ELA. No, I'm sorry, we're not. We're at history. We're at history. Okay, so dollar sign, wait a second. How did I do this? Let me just make sure I do this right. C4. Yeah, that's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. Okay. Yeah. Dollar sign C, dollar sign 2, colon, dollar sign C, dollar sign 97. And actually, in the other one, I did it all the way up to 1,000 just in case we added numbers, but that's all right. So that's history, comma, and then I'm comparing it with ELA, right? So I say B2 to B97, B2 through B97. All right, colon. Okay, and then we want to bring it to the 100th, and then we drag it over. All right, and then if we're doing it correctly, this is kind of how you check your work. If you're doing it correctly, you should have a diagonal of 1.0. You can also kind of spot check all of them just to make sure E2 to E97 is going to be science. So this is history and science, so we're good. All right, so now we're just going to roll through this. This B, that's C, so equals, okay, dollar sign, so math is D, dollar sign 2, colon, dollar sign D, dollar sign 97, comma, and then ELA. So B2, B97. All right, and we'll make this into the 100th, and then we will, just like that. And now we have that diagonal 1.0, so we're looking good. Science, dollar sign, what is it? Dollar sign E, dollar sign 2, colon, dollar sign E, dollar sign 97, comma, ELA, B2, B97. All right, make this there, drag it across. All right, diagonal 1.0, we're looking good. Last one, equal, what was this? Dollar sign F2, dollar sign F97. Oh, I forgot the colon. I forgot everything. Dollar sign F, dollar sign 2, dollar sign F, dollar sign 97, comma, B2, colon, B97. Get that to the 100th. All right. Drag that across. Did I make a mistake? I did not. So that's like that. All right, and there's your correlations. Now, what you can also do up here, we'll do a couple things real quick. First of all, just to make it a little bit more readable, we will box it with these lines here. I'll make it like this, center it. Okay, that's our correlation. We can do our averages. Oops. So, yep, average. We're not averaging that though. Cool. So we want our ELA average. So it's B2 to B97. Okay, and so there's my average. I can get that to there, and then I can drag this across, and that will intuitively give me the averages for the rest of the disciplines. I can then do up here, I can do a standard deviation. The reason why I would want to do a standard deviation is just to see if any of the distributions are wildly different from each other. If you have a very large standard deviation, then what that suggests is that your average is sort of like your head is in the oven and your feet are in the freezer. So on average, you are comfortable. It suggests that your distribution is wide. So there were a lot of people who say failed and a lot of people that did really well. It's on either ends. If your standard deviation is very small, what that suggests is that your average is your most of your grades are clustered around your average. So standard deviation is STDEV, and then you just go the range of your scores. Now again, I did it on this sheet here on the demonstration sheet. I did just the range of scores. You could go on the one I originally did. I did it all the way to like 1,000, just in case I added things later. You can do that because there's no zeros. It's not going to compute the zero. I do this to the nearest whole number. So what this tells us is that if my average is 69 and my standard deviation is 15, that means that about 2/3 of my students scored within one standard deviation of the mean. And so what that means is that 66% of my students scored, say, what is that? Between 61 or so and 77, 61 and 77. So you can kind of, this one's, so 14 and 7 is 7. So 66% of history students scored between 63 and 77. Did I do this math right? So we'll call that 8, right? Half of 15 is 7.5. So we'll call it 8. So 61 and 76. All right. So one last thing. I know this is almost a 20-minute video, but one last thing. If you wanted to, highlight the values here, and you could make this even more readable by going up to Format, going to Conditional Formatting, going over to Color Scale, Apply to Range. So what you want to do is the minimum value is going to be a number, and that number is going to be -1 because that's the lowest possible correlation it could be. And then I make the negative correlations red. That's just how I do it. And then the midpoint is a number. Midpoint is 0. And I make that white. You can do anything you want, but that's just how I do it. Max point number, we'll make that 1.0, and we'll make that green. So everything, as it gets closer to 0, it gets closer to just being plain white. If it's a negative correlation, it's red. As it gets closer to 1.0, it gets closer to solid green. And so that's just a quick visual. And so now I can just quickly look at this and see that everything's in the green. Students who are strong students in one class tend to be strong students in other classes. There's nowhere where this isn't true. And the strength is all pretty strong. So any questions, you know where to reach me. That's how I do. And it really only took me, it took me 20 minutes to make the video. And so it probably took me 30 minutes to actually plug all those numbers in, or maybe less, 20 or 30 minutes. So the whole thing probably took me 45 minutes to do if you really want to do it. All right. Again, if you have any questions, let me know. Thanks.